right, we'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Board of Water Resources to order. Today is Thursday, May 11th, and it's great to have everyone here. Good to see you all. Very excited. One of the first things on our agenda is to go into an oath of office, and so very excited to have our new board members with us. And I will note that Randy Crozier is excused. Just for purposes of the record, and we've got some new people, I'm sure, streaming online. We'll go through quick introductions. I am Juliet Tennert, chairing the board this year, representing Salt Lake and Tooele. Mr. Charles Holmgren.
I'm Charles Holmgren. I represent the Bear River Basin, which includes Box Elder, Cache, and Rich counties.
I'm Dana Van Horn with Grand, San Juan, and Carbon County, and Emery County.
Kyle Stevens with Weber River District.
Spencer Jones representing Iron, Washington, Kane, Beaver, and Millard counties.
Blaine Ibsen representing the Sevier River District.
Excellent, thank you very much. And Director Hassenjäger, can you tell us who is here from your team today?
Yes, thank you. Joel Williams, Shalane DiBernardi, Todd Stonley, Marisa Egbert, Tom Cox, Ben Marett, Stephen Gregerson, Russell Hadley, Michael Sanchez, Martin Bushman, Randy Staker, Shannon Clowes doing our minutes. Thank you, Shannon. And then our amazing AV team that makes it all possible to live stream this. Paul Gedge, Carmen McDonald, and Seth Majors are also us. And then we also have a special guest from the department, Deputy Director Todd Adams.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, we will use that introduction of our Deputy Director Todd Adams as a segue into our first agenda item, which is the oath of office for our new board members. That we also, I think, have a reappointment, another re-upping of the oath of office for Blaine Ibsen as well. So I'll invite our Deputy Director to take us through that.
Howdy, it's good to be back with the Board of Water Resources. As you know, I spent a lot of time here, and it's really good to be back. So we're excited for one reappointment. Blaine, you and I worked fairly close when we were playing COVID, and we always enjoyed working with the commander at that time. And Spencer and Dana, welcome to the Board of Water Resources. So what we need to do is take an oath, and I'd ask that you stand up and raise your right arm to the square. I will say a few things, and then you can insert your name as we get there. So raise your arm. I state your name. Having been appointed, follow me, sorry. Okay. I state your name. Having been appointed by Spencer J. Cox and confirmed by the Utah Senate as a member of the Board of Water Resources, do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity. Congratulations, new board members. That's so exciting.
Thank you. Well, congratulations. And I kept on saying you're official, but we're so excited to really have you official now. And also very glad because we now have a quorum for this meeting and we can take action on
Madam
the
Chair,
agenda
if it's
items.
okay, I've got certificates for each
Great.
one of them, and I'll bring them
Yeah,
up.
thank you very much. And while he's doing that, we can go ahead and start moving into our next agenda item, which is the election of a vice chair. So given that we've had a bit of a turnover, we do have a vacancy in that vice chair position. So I'd be looking for a motion.
Madam Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we appoint Charles Holmgren as Vice Chair of the Board.
I think that is a fantastic motion. Is there
I'll second that.
All right. Motion made by Blaine Ibsen has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Excellent. Congratulations, another round.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, next we have approval of the minutes. I know that everyone has had an opportunity to Or questions, comments, or a motion to approve those minutes?
Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we approve the minutes from previous board meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Great, next we have a very exciting presentation. We'll invite Jordan Clayton up, and in our briefing meeting, we asked the staff if there was, anything we needed to know, and they just said it will be a great presentation. So thanks for joining us, and we'll get the AV going.
Thank you very much. Can you see the slides?
Not yet.
No, we can't see the slides yet. If Paul or Carmen can come out.
I can talk about this now.
We want pictures, Jordan.
There you go, I know. Let's give them, there we go.
Are we good?
Now it's
Oh, look at that
working.
lovely picture. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again for having me. My name is Jordan Clayton. I'm the supervisor of the Utah Snow Survey. I wanted to bring you up to speed on the current water conditions, snowpack conditions, and what we're seeing across the state. I have a little bit of a longer presentation this morning than I normally give for these updates, so I thought I'd include a few extra details since the last time we spoke. But I wanted to start with the typical map that I show of the major basins of the state of Utah. This also has the snow-tell sites across the state. They're all colored by percent normal, and this is as of today. We see that we're hanging in there above 150% of normal, as we have been pretty much all winter. It's been obviously an outstanding winter from a snowpack perspective. As I mentioned, you can see the percent normal numbers for the major basins. You can also see the individual snow-tell sites that are colored by the same percent normal scheme. So you can see there are a few locations that are in that 130 to 150% range, and a couple others that are slightly lower, but by and large, we're in that very excellent territory of having almost too much snow. Compared to last year, you can see it's an incredible difference. We're looking again at this day last year versus this day today, and the major basins in Utah have obviously benefited from this incredible snowpack winter that we've had. When we combine all the snow-tell sites into one graph, we get this graph that I show a lot, and I think the media has started to show these as well. And what we're seeing here is the current water year, the current the situation as the black line. And I've also plotted here 1983, which is that light blue line that hovers around the maximum, particularly in spring and late spring. By comparison, normal is that green line. And then you can see the range of previous observations that are shaded by percentile in the background. We peaked this year on April 6th to April 8th at 30 inches of snow water equivalent when we average all of our snow-tell sites across the state, which is a really amazing total that beat the previous maximum from 1983 that was at 26 inches. So we really blew the previous record out of the water. And we also blew out of the water, so to speak, the 1952 record, which was more from manual measurements. We didn't have snow-tell sites back then. But we have we had snow course measurements at manual locations since the 1930s. And when we look at those data, we did have a higher peak than 1983, which was in 1952, but we beat that this year as well by a significant margin. And so we really are in uncharted territory this winter from our snow water equivalent perspective. That being said, as you can see, that black line has tumbled quite a bit recently. We're down about 45% from the peak as of today. We're currently 274% of normal. Obviously, we've passed our peak suite at this point, and we are seeing, I think, significantly a sooner melt out than we saw in 1983, which again is that other blue line, which is hopefully helping with our flood mitigation, which we can talk a little bit more about later on. We are still breaking records at some of our snow-tell sites in terms of the amount of snow water equivalent that we're observing as of today. We have 5 that are still showing a record high. Those are the dark blue dots. And then the light blue dots are 10 others that are second highest. There were quite a larger number of sites that were breaking records earlier in the winter, but still to have 5 that are still showing the record highest despite all the melting that we've had is pretty impressive. Soil moisture has obviously responded to all that snow the water coming out of the snowpack. Some of it's clearly making it into our streams and reservoirs. We'll talk more about that in just a second. And a lot of it is also making it into the ground. You can see the current water year again shown by that black line, and we're currently right in the top 10th percentile of the range of observations that we've seen for this state. We're in that purple zone of the backdrop there. We're currently about 80% saturated. This is, again, sweeping across all the SNOTEL sites in the state. I know there are important regional differences, but this is just looking at one value. And that's well above normal for this time of year, as I mentioned, the top 10th percentile. These wet soils are going to promote good runoff efficiency, which is good. We want to fill our reservoirs, but it is also something that we're concerned about from a flooding perspective. We also monitor precipitation from the beginning of the water year, of course, from October 1st. We're currently, from a statewide perspective, at 143% of normal. In that, we're hovering right around that 90th percentile. And you can see the same type of map here. We're colored by, again, percent normal, but the same coloring scheme in terms of now precipitation. And this is not just snow. This is any kind of liquid or solid precipitation at all those SNOTEL sites. So the northeastern Uintas and the Sanpete are slightly lower, but they're still well above normal for this time of year. Reservoir levels as of May 1st, this is not including Lake Powell or Flaming Gorge. We're at about 57% of capacity statewide as of May 1st, as I mentioned. This also doesn't consider the Great Salt Lake, so we need to also keep those things in mind. We'll come back to that later on in the presentation. And the reservoirs are probably significantly higher today than they were even just at the beginning of the month. We're expecting this number to be quite a bit higher when we compile the reservoir numbers by the end of May and look at a June 1 number. The snowmelt runoff is happening in earnest right now. And then we also noticed that many reservoirs, of course, managers were drawing them down in anticipation of really large snowmelt runoff. So that May 1 value is actually, I think, artificially low for that reason. Our streamflow forecasts around the state, these are not SNOTEL sites anymore. These are streamflow runoff locations. These are showing the percent of normal, and here I'm using percent of average for the entire length of record, the entire period of record, just to really give a fair comparison. And where you see those dark blue dots, that's where we have greater than 300% of normal flow that's anticipated from April through July at those locations. So 3 times normal flow with those dark blue dots. The kind of medium blue dots are closer to 200% of normal flow, and that's 39 locations around the state that are going to get twice the normal amount of flow compared to their, again, long periods of record. So that's very impressive. I did want to walk around the state and look at these forecast charts for each basin, and I'll walk you through how to read these. We didn't do this in quite as much detail at the last time we met in March, and I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this since we don't have the water user meeting to piggyback off this time. So what's shown here in each one of these rows are individual forecast locations. This happens to be for the Weber-Ogden Basin. So if we go to the top one, we see we're looking at the Weber River near Oakley. It's one of our older stream gauges in the state. And within each one of those, we've, of course, have a range of probabilistic forecasts for that April through July flow in terms of volume. But the middle value is the 50th percentile value. That's the most likely. And these are in terms of thousands of acre feet. So we're saying that we have 176,000 acre feet that's predicted for the Weber River at Oakley in terms of the most probable flow. Of course, there's, again, a range. I also plotted on here the previous record. So you can see to the right of that, we have 1907. It got to 254,000 acre feet for that same 4-month period. And so I'm going to just jump around the state here. I obviously won't go through each line and in each forecast, but I wanted to at least identify locations around the state where we might break previous records for context. So again, sticking with the Weber-Ogden, towards the bottom here, you can see the previous record from 2011. It's circled in red for Pineview Reservoir inflow. It's not statistically likely, but it is possible that we will break that record. It would be within the top 70% of observations. If we jump to the Bear, we're looking at the Little Bear at Paradise. It is quite likely that we will break the previous record there. It's statistically very likely that we'll break that 108,000 acre feet from 2011 by a lot. If we jump to the Provo-Jordan Basin, we're looking at the American Fork above the Upper Power Plant, and also both of the Cottonwoods, Little Cottonwood and Big Cottonwood, are all likely to break previous records, particularly the Big Cottonwood Creek near Salt Lake City. Other portions of the state, northeastern Uintas, very high runoff forecast, but probably not going to break any records there. Tooele Valley, West Desert, we might break the South Willow Creek near Grantsville record from 1984. For the Duchesne, lots of very high flows that are forecast, but probably not going to break records, mainly from 2011 there. Going to the Price San Rafael, we probably aren't going to break any records there, but you can see we're going to get close in a few cases potentially. If I'm going too fast, I'm also going to point out where to get these on our webpage, so we can not spend too much time on this. apologize for mislabeling the red dot box on this. I was reformatting right before I got here. Mill Creek at Shealy Tunnel near Moab is the one that's supposed to be circled there. And that one is potentially going to break the record from 1993. We also have the upper Sevier, lower Sevier, and Sanpete here that are also quite high and going to potentially be very interesting to deal with, but those ones are probably not going to break any records. Southwestern Utah, the same situation, very high forecast, but probably not breaking records there. If I went too fast, this is where you can get these forecast charts on our webpage. Just go to where it says click here for our streamflow forecast, and then click where it says charts for Utah basins. Okay, I wanted to also talk about our surface water supply indices. These were included in our recent May 1 water supply outlook report that just came out about a week ago. And what this does is it combines the volume of water that we're forecasting with the volume of water that's currently in each one of these basins in terms of our reservoir supply. And from that, we get an overall picture for what volume of water we're going to have available when all that snow melts. We then compare this to previous 30 years to get a percentile and get a sense for how well we're doing relative to normal. Where we have a percentile, that second to last column, that's better than 50%, that's obviously an implication that we're better than normal, and then vice versa for less than 50%. So if we look at this current May 1 surface water supply index chart, we see that 11 of our 19 basins are projected to exceed the 75th percentile, or in other words, have the top 25% of observations for water supply. And then all other basins in the state, except for the Bear and the Sanpete, are going to be in the 50th to 70th percentile range. The Bear and the Sanpete are the only ones that are not at least going to be projected to be normal this summer. How does that compare to last year? The current percentiles are shown on the left side here, and last year's are shown on the right side, and you can see the percent change across the state. We have some really drastic changes, particularly in the upper Sevier and the Virgin, where we see just tremendous difference from last year to this year. We do also need to consider our larger water bodies that are downstream from our reservoir systems. Of course, I think we're all, we talk about these a lot, but Lake Powell and the Great Salt Lake need to be also brought into the conversation, I think. And I just have graphs for both of those from recent data. Our low at Lake Powell from March was 3520 in terms of its elevation. We're up about 14 feet at Lake Powell since then. A similar story for the Great Salt Lake. We're up about 4.3 feet at the Great Salt Lake since our low in November, compared to our mean that would be about 5 feet higher at that location. So despite the great news about our winter, we are going to need multiple above normal winters to really start to rebound in those larger and very significant water bodies. And then I'm borrowing a couple slides here from colleagues with the U.S. Geological Survey. The map on the right shows the stream gauges across the state and how they're performing right now in terms of percent of normal flow. Those dark blue dots are much above normal, top 10th percentile of observations, and the black are where we're seeing new high. And as you can see, a lot of stream gauges right now are going off. We know that that's happening. We've seen that around the state. And there's very little green and very little anything less than green on this diagram. And on the left side, this is kind of nice. It shows the percentage of stream gauges across the state in all of these different categories. We do have probably about 30%, 40% that are in that green normal range, but quite a large number that are above normal, as you can see from those light blue, medium blue, and black shades. We can also look at how this compares to the last several years. The last time we were looking at a good flow situation, as we know, was 2019. You can see the black line showing how things did that year. And then since then, it's been a pretty sad story until we get to this year's runoff, where we're starting to really perform well, finally, after a long period of dry conditions. Things are looking warm and dry for the next short period. 8 to 14 day outlook from NOAA says that we're going to be above normal in the next, again, 8 to 14 days in terms of temperatures. And then the precipitation looks very positive for the southern half of the state, less so for the northern half of the state, but it is tilted towards above normal, at least for the next 2 weeks. And that's all I have. Happy to take questions.
All right, thank you, Jordan. Questions? The board, comments?
Yeah, Jordan, you know, when the precipitation seems to have stopped up in the Bear River Basin all of a sudden, now we need a rainstorm to irrigate our replanted wheat that died from too much snow over the winter.
Wait, so should we, Jordan, we just email to you?
Just email,
what we need
right.
and where we need it, and you'll get.
I'll give you my direct deposit account number. Yep.
That's great. Well, thanks as always, and we always appreciate the information. And thanks also to directing us to some of that information. I'll definitely be looking at it, and I know some interest, sharing with some interested parties. So
Excellent.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, very good. We'll see you next time. Okay, let's go ahead and move on into our applications. We've got a number of committal of funds up, and so let's go ahead and start with project RE 450. That's the Draper Irrigation Company. And Russell, I'll ask you to take us through this project, and then I will note that we have a couple of representatives for the project online, or, oh, they're here. I thought I saw them here. So here, and so we'll invite you up. Great, thank you very much.
Okay, Madam Chairman, members of the board, the proposed project is located in Draper and Bluffdale in Salt Lake County. The purpose of the overall project is to drill 4 shallow wells, install the Jordan Basin Water Reclamation Facility, reuse pump station, upgrade the Fort Street pump station, and install almost 11,000 feet of pipeline. The project will allow the applicant to blend their share of the Jordan Basin Water Reclamation Facility effluent with shallow groundwater to use a higher water quality source for their pressurized secondary system. The applicant will construct the project in 3 phases as follows. And just to review some of the work that's already been done on this, Draper Irrigation Company has installed a lot of that pipeline you see on the map here, that in green. They'd also done a small project with us to put pipeline underneath the railroad and under the Jordan River. And so a lot of pipeline going into this project has already been done. Okay, phase 1. We'll develop the shallow wells and install almost 10,000 feet of 16 and 30-inch pipeline. Construction is to begin in the fall of 2023. Total estimated cost is estimated at $9,570,000. It'll include contingencies, engineering, and appurtenant costs, and a $2 million U.S. Bureau of Reclamation Drought Resiliency Grant has been obtained for Phase 1. Phase 2 will consist of constructing the Jordan Basin Water Reclamation Facility, reuse pump station, and install 1,000 feet of pipeline. Construction for that phase will begin in the fall of 2024. Total estimated cost is approximately $7,800,000. That'll include contingency, engineering, and appurtenant costs. Phase 3 will consist of upgrades to the Fort Street pump station. Construction for that phase will begin in fall of 2025. Total estimated cost for that is $4,550,000. It'll again include the contingency, engineering, and appurtenant costs. An application for $5 million for a U.S. Bureau of Reclamation Drought Resiliency Grant has been submitted for Phase 2 and 3 together. The applicant is requesting committal of funds only for Phase 1 at this time, and will return for the board for committal of funds for Phase 2 and 3 when they're ready to proceed with each phase. As shown, the cost is still, for the overall project, is still estimated to be $22 million. The total authorized and proposed Phase 1 cost sharing are as follows. The original authorization for the $22 million project was for the board to fund 85% of that, or $18,700,000, and the Draper Irrigation Company would fund 15% of that, or $3.3 million. Now that we're breaking it into phases, it is proposed for the Phase 1 cost sharing to be the board provide $6,435,000. The Bureau of Reclamation grant will be $2 million, and the applicant will provide $1,135,000. And as for those percentages for those phases, the board share still represents 85% of the non-grant amount. That's what the 67.2% is. That's 85% of the non-grant amount. At authorization, the board agreed to provide 85% of the project cost, up to $18,700,000, and the project was to be purchased at 1% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $849,100. With this new proposed phasing, Phase 1 cost sharing is now, staff recommends the board commit 67.2% of the Phase 1 costs, up to $6,435,000, and that the project be purchased at 1% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $292,200. That is staff's report.
All right, thank you, Russell. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. We have Mr. Steve Cunningham, who's the Associate General Manager for Draper Irrigation Company, and John Oldman, who is the engineer for the project with us. Does the board have any questions of Russell or the applicants on this committal of funds?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to hear from these
Yeah.
two gentlemen
Yeah.
first, maybe if they have any
Yeah, do you have
additional-
anything you'd like to share with the board?
Oh, yes.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate the effort by staff and the board to work with us in these efforts. The project, when we first applied for this, and it was the committal of funds was approved back then, we have since been able to obtain these grants, and they're phased amounts to correlate with the grants, and so there's timing to be had by each of these grants. So we've received notice of selection on the $5 million, and we're in the process of getting that contract in place as we work with the Bureau. So significant cost and benefit to both the division here and us as a company by receiving these grants. So we appreciate the efforts and consideration here.
Thank you.
I had a question on, if you could pull the map back up, Russell. It looks like part of the project piping will be going under I-15. What size is the pipe that's going under that section of the freeway?
So you have 30-inch.
Okay.
Underneath the freeway, yeah.
Because it indicated there were differing sizes from 16 to 30-inch, but that is a 30-inch.
Correct. The 16-inch is reflective of the well size that's in correlation with fill.
Okay.
We'd also mention they've drilled successful test wells, so they're ready to go with production wells.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
a question for the applicant. How deep are your shallow wells, and are you using the effluent directly, or do you put it over the wells and let that go down and repump that water through your wells?
So the shallow wells will be close to 150 feet deep, and they will be blended with the reuse water. And so they can operate independently, but the idea is they'll both feed into the same pipe, pump into the irrigation system. But because we'll be able to operate the wells sooner than the reuse water, we'll be able to utilize that water much sooner. So.
Okay, so does the reuse water, is it used directly when you do use it, or it isn't, you don't dump it on top of the wells?
Nope, it's used directly.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I will, before looking for a motion, I will make the point that the window for electronic public comment has closed, and we did not receive any electronic public comment on this project or any of the other projects that are on the agenda, so just for the record. So seeing no other comments or questions, I would be looking for a motion.
Madam Chair, I will make a motion that the board commit 67.2% of the Phase 1 costs up to $6,435,000, and that the project be purchased at 1% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $292,200.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
All right, so we have a motion made by Charles Holmgren, seconded by Kyle Stevens. Any discussion to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, that committal of funds has been approved. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. We'll invite Ben Marett up to go through the next 4 projects. We'll start with committal for project RM026, Town of Annabella.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. So these next 4 projects are all very similar. Secondary water projects, which have previously had grant funds both authorized and committed. They have had loan funds authorized and have proceeded through the hoops and have successfully jumped through all of them and are ready for committal of funds. The first project is Town of Annabella. They are seeking funding to purchase and install 224 secondary water meters. And staff recommends that the board commit 16.7% of the project cost, up to $113,000 as a loan, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $9,000, including reserves. And that is staff's very brief report.
All right, thank you, Ben. Any questions or comments on this project? Looking for a motion then.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board commit 16.7% of the project cost up to $113,000 as a loan, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $9,000, which includes reserves.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, thank you. Moved by Blaine Ipson, seconded by Kyle Stevens. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That committal is approved. Thank you. All right, Ben, RM028.
Okay, Gunnison City has similarly proceeded through all of the necessary requirements and is ready for committal of funds. They are seeking funding to purchase and install approximately 850 secondary water meters. Staff recommends that the board commit 25.5% of the project cost up to $1,030,000 as a loan, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $80,000, including reserves. That is staff's report.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this committal of funds? Looking for a motion, if not?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board commit 25.5% of the project cost up to $1,030,000 as a loan, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $80,000, which includes reserves.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'd like to second that motion.
Great. Thank you. Moved by Blaine Ipson and seconded by Spencer Jones. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, thank you. That committal of funds for Gunnison City is approved. Next, Ben, RM065.
Okay, the Benchland Water District is also prepared for committal of funds. Staff recommends that the board, I'd just like to mention that they are looking for money to purchase and install approximately 1,900 secondary water meters. So staff recommends that the board commit 31% of the project cost up to $2,440,000 as a loan, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $189,000, including reserves. That is staff's report.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Any questions or comments? All right, looking for a motion then.
Madam Chairman, I'll make that motion And the motion is that the board commit 31% of the project cost up to $2,440,000 as a loan, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $189,000, which includes reserves.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Okay, moved by Kyle Stevens, seconded by Blaine Ipson. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right. Rule that motion passes. And then finally, the last committal of funds item, RM 067.
Okay, the Wolf Creek Irrigation Company has proceeded through the project requirements and is prepared to have funds committed to the project. They're seeking funding to purchase and install 170 secondary water meters. Staff recommends that the board commit 25.5% of the project cost up to $132,600, and that the project be purchased at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $9,600. That is staff's report.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Questions, comments? And if not, we'd be looking for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll make that motion that the board commit 25.5% of the project cost up to $132,600, and that the project be purchased at 1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $9,600.
Thank you.
Second to the motion.
All right,
Madam
thank
Chair.
you. So we have a motion by Kyle Stevens, seconded by Charles Holmgren. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay. That committal of funds has been approved. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Moving on in the agenda to a number of special items, we'll invite Tom Cox up, and we will start with RC 023.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the Sevier Bridge Dam, which holds back Yuba Reservoir, is located in Juab County, but it provides water for the area around the delta area in Millard County. It's owned and operated by the Consolidated Sevier Bridge Reservoir Company. It's rated as a high hazard dam by the State Division of Water Rights, and so it falls under the restrictions of the minimum standards dam safety program. So the board a year ago committed funds for a project to bring that dam up to minimum standards. This is actually the phase 2 of the project. Phase 1 was completed in around the year 2004. It cost about $3.5 million, and it included outlet improvements, control gates on the upstream side, and the stability work on the upstream side of the dam. So only that much work was done then because of limited funding that the board had available. So now we're here to phase 2, which includes removing and replacing the existing spillway, doing some downstream foundation improvement work, putting in tow drains, and constructing a stability berm to address seismic issues. So the project's under construction. You can see here we have kind of a before and after pictures. On the lower left is the old spillway. So this is standing in the spillway looking up towards the reservoir. And so we need to flip our point of view for the second picture, and this is now looking downstream. You can see the spillway is all gone. They're doing work to clean off the bedrock for the foundation for the new spillway. And this picture was taken about 3 weeks ago. I was down there yesterday, and they're putting down the preliminary concrete work with anticipation of starting pouring footings for the spillway walls in a week or so. So that's the spillway work. This picture, the lower left one, shows the embankment. It's as it was before the project started. The one on the upper right was the 3 weeks ago. And I mentioned some of the parts of the project. Let me see if I can you see the mouse here? Okay. So we mentioned the tow drain. So this work along here is the tow drain that they're installing. And here, this is an auger that's drilling the holes, and this is a machine that injects gravel, granular fill into the holes, and they vibrate that and it densifies it, and that densifies the material downstream of the dam. So they're using that method on this dam to take care of the liquefaction, the potential liquefaction problem that would happen during an earthquake. So they're moving right along. So they're hoping to get construction finished before the end of the year. And it looks like the contractor's on track to do that. So a year ago, we needed funds for engineering and to purchase the spillway gates. So the board went ahead and committed as much dam safety grant funds that we had available at that time, which was the $17.1 million. And the board also committed $1.9 million in dam safety loans. So if you look at the chart, it shows $19 million cost estimate. That really wasn't what it was then. It was still anticipated even back then to be $26 million. But those numbers are just based on the amount of dam safety grant money that we had in order to keep the project cost sharing in line. So the division has received an additional appropriation from the legislature for dam safety projects. So that gives the money available right now for us to commit the rest of it. So that's what we'll be asking the board to do today. So it's recommended that the board provide 90% of the project cost up to $23.4 million in dam safety grant, and 10% of the project cost up to $2.6 million in loan. So staff recommends the board commit an additional $6.3 million in dam safety grant funds, and that the grant contract be amended to state the board will provide the 90% of the project cost up to the $23.4 million. And we also recommend the board commit an additional $700,000 in loan funds, that the funding agreement be amended to state the board will provide 10% of the project cost up to $2.6 million as a loan from the Conservation and Development Fund to be returned at 0.1% interest over 20 years with annual payments of approximately $131,400. That's staff's report.
Great. Thank you, Tom. I understand that Mr. Andy Nickel, who is president for the company, has joined us online. Mr. Nickel, do you have anything to share that you'd like to share with the board in addition to Tom's presentation?
Not right now. I think he summed it up very well. The project is moving along really, really well. We're excited about the progress that's been made and hope that it'll keep to going. I just want to let everybody know and say thank you for all the help that we've had with this.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Nickel. Does the board have any questions for Tom or the applicant, or any comments?
Madam Chair, this is Blaine Ibsen. I need to declare that I am a stockholder in some of these companies, and so with that in mind, I will not be able to make a motion or participate in any voting on this, but I would like to echo what Andy has said. We really appreciate the support, the help with this project. It's gone really well, and appreciate the help from the board on this.
Great. Thank you, Blaine. Questions or comments? All right. You're looking for a motion then.
Madam Chair, I'll make those motions.
That's right.
So the first motion will be that the board commit an additional $6,300,000 in dam safety grants, and that the contract be amended to state the board will provide 90% of the project cost up to $23,400,000 as a dam safety grant.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, I will second the motion.
Okay, moved by Kyle Stevens, seconded by Charles Holmgren. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, I will rule that.
If you'll please note that I did not
Yes,
vote.
yep, and just make it for the record, Blaine Ibsen was not a part of that vote. And that will be the same on the next one. So that motion passes, and so we'd be looking for another motion then on the loan portion.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'll make the second motion as well, and that is that the board commit an additional $700,000 in loan funds, and that the funding agreement be amended to state the board will provide 10% of the project cost up to $2,600,000 as a loan from the Conservation and Development Fund to be returned at 0.1% interest over 20 years with annual payments of approximately $131,400.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I will second the motion.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and I will rule that that motion passes, again noting that Blaine Ibsen has abstained. All right, thank you very much. So let's move on to the next item then. And Tom, I believe you're presenting this to us as well. That is project RC057, Ferron Canal and Reservoir Company.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the board, the Ferron Canal and Reservoir Company owns and operates Mill Site Dam. It's located in Emery County. The board has been working with the company for several years on this project, and it also is a dam safety upgrade project. Mill Site Dam is a high hazard dam, and the project has been to update the dam to meet minimum standards. So back in, how long ago was that? Okay, let's just go back 3 years when the last time the project was presented before the board. So at that time, the board committed some additional funds for the project, which is to remove and replace the existing spillway. So that's this beautiful looking structure there. It's new, bigger, and improved over the last one. And they also had seismic concerns, liquefaction concerns. So along this portion of the dam, those liquefiable materials were actually excavated out. A tow drain system was put in, and a stability berm was installed. If you look close, you can see kind of a line running across there. That's the top of the stability berm there. So the construction started on the project in 2017, and it was anticipated to be finished by the end of 2018. But there were issues that came up partly in the design of the spillway, which was discovered after the spillway was under construction. So that kind of stopped work until they could figure that out. And the contractor took longer than anticipated to do the work. And also in conjunction with the project, if you can see the greenery along here, that's the golf course. There we go. Mm-hmm. So that was obviously impacted by the construction because they were working right on the dam there. That had to be restored. The mill site, the state park is located just around the outside of the picture here. The project impacted that, so there needed to be improvements to the state park, which is part of the project. And also there's a county road that needed stabilization that was due to the project too. They raised the crest a little bit, so that raised the water level a little, which impacted the park and the state roads. So basically the work on the embankment is finished, and the golf course, but they're just working on the county road stabilization now. So it's because of the spillway issues and the extended construction period and increase in costs, the cost estimate has increased from 3 years ago. Back then, it was $37.2 million, but because of those factors I mentioned, it's risen to $39.5 million. So back 3 years ago, when the board committed those funds, if you notice on the chart, it says Water Resources Grant/Loan. Back then, we needed over $6 million to cover the costs. Back then, the board only had $3 million in dam safety grant funds. So you committed all that you had, and then the sponsor was willing to take a short-term kind of bridge loan to cover the rest of the cost in order to keep the money flowing to the project. So with the understanding that that loan would be paid off with dam safety grants when they became available. So they're now available, so the company's back before the board for additional grant monies that will pay off that loan plus pay the board's cost share of the remaining project. So that being said, the cost share, if you look now, is $15,930,000 from Water Resources. The NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, is contributing funds to the project, so they're contributing about $21,800,000, which leaves the applicant $1,770,000. So staff recommends the board commit an additional $4,360,000 in dam safety grant, and that the contract be amended to state the board will provide 40.3% of the project cost, up to $15,930,000. Madam Chair, members of the board, that's staff's report.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. I understand that Mr. Roger Barton is online representing the company. Oh, a board member for the company is online. Mr. Barton, do you have anything that you'd like to share with us in addition to Tom's presentation?
I would just like to thank Tom and the staff, the designers, and Water Resource Board for their patience in helping us get this project completed. We had Norm Johnson, he was on your board at the time we started, and we burned him out, I guess. Now we've got Dana Van Horn, and I hope she makes it through our project. We really appreciate all of your support, and the project is going to be an amazing project for this community, and just wanted to thank all of you, and especially the staff, for your creative financing and the design work and all of that that's helped us through this.
Great, thank you, Mr. Barton. Does the board have any questions for Tom or Mr. Barton? Great. If not, I would be, or Blaine, do you have any? Yeah.
Madam Chair, I just have a question. Tom says that you're hopeful that it will conclude construction this year. Are you hopeful for that too, Roger? Are you pretty comfortable with that, or what's your thoughts?
Yes, we are. We had our major line of construction was some road work on the west end of the dam, and they thought they would do some of that work this spring and then finish this fall. We've lowered the dam or the reservoir down, and with the cool weather, there's a possibility that they can complete that this spring or at least early summer. And so they're a little bit more on the golf course, but we will this year, yes.
All right. All right, any other questions?
Glad to hear it. You're glad to hear it, aren't you?
Most certainly, thank you. Very glad to hear it. All right, if there are no other questions, I'd be looking for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board commit an additional $4,360,000 in dam safety grant, and that the contract be amended to state the board will provide 40.3% of the project cost, up to $15,930,000.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Dana Van Horn,
I'll second the motion.
seconded by Kyle Stevens. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, that motion passes, and this item is approved. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Tom. I'll invite Ben Marett back up, and we will hear about project RE308. Thank you. I'll also invite Phil Rowley and Todd Rowley up. Thank you, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. Oh, I apologize. There was a small map in there that looks like didn't make it into the final copy, but it just showed the location of the well I'll talk to you about here in just a second, and also an elevation pond or a head pond that the city owns. But the well that is that we're going to talk about in the project is basically, what's the address? It's like 400 south. 100 west in Santaquin, so it's basically just right there in town. Anyway, we'll have to do without a map, I guess. But this project is part of a project that began back in 2012. And as we discussed earlier, I guess I'll go over it briefly again. It is part of an effort to attenuate floodwaters around Santaquin and Genola and protect them, and also to help stabilize the aquifer in the area. The project is a major, there was a lot of entities that collaborated together, including Santaquin City, Genola City, the Strawberry Highline Canal Company, the Summit Creek Irrigation Company, and Utah County that all worked together on this project. It was completed in multiple phases, where there was work completed on debris basins, including outlet gates. Thousands of feet of pipe were installed. Canals were repaired and fixed. Control structures were installed. And to date, the board has invested $1,776,500. And the project has proceeded through 3 phases. And in this 4th phase, the applicant is trying to get aquifer recharge and recovery permit, and one of the requirements that they have to meet in order to get that permit from the Division of Water Rights is they have to utilize their full water right, which brings us to this project where they would like to install a new pump and motor inside of an existing well. The well was drilled back in 1970, and initially, the equipment that was installed in the well pumped too much water, so much water, in fact, that it pulled debris into the pump from the aquifer and caused the equipment to fail. The well has been sitting idle for, about 10 years or so. And at this point, the applicant is requesting funding to install a new pump and a new well, a new pump and motor on the well. In the well. The city of Santaquin is also working with the applicant this time around because they would like to contribute some money to the project to upsize the motor, which will prevent them from having to install and maintain their own booster pump station. They would like to pump water from the well up to an elevation pond. The city owns 25% of the shares in the canal company, which they use for secondary water. And with that, staff recommends that the board commit an additional $373,700 and amend the purchase agreement to state that the board will provide 85% of the project cost, up to $2,094,200. The balance of the purchase price shall be returned at 2.5% interest over 20 years, with annual payments of approximately $114,000. That is staff support.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. Mr. Phil Rowley or Mr. Todd Rowley, do you have anything else that you'd like to share in addition to Ben's report?
Well, we just appreciate all of throughout this whole project, we've appreciated our resources.
Great, thank you.
Project has helped us to move a lot of water.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. They need to talk into the mic, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess your mics aren't on. We thought
Okay.
they were.
Oh.
Go for it.
No, we'd like,
Thank you.
we'd like to thank you for your help with this project. This project has helped us move a lot of water this year, especially in the high water and mitigated a lot of flooding. And so, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions for Ben or the applicants? If not, I'd be looking for a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board commit an additional $373,700 and amend the purchase agreement to state the board will provide 85% of the project costs up to $2,094,200. The balance of the purchase price shall be returned at 2.5% interest over 20 years with annual payments of approximately $114,000.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Spencer Jones. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I would like to second that motion.
Thank you. Seconded by Blaine Ibsen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right. That item is approved. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Ben. All right, and we will invite Russell Hadley back up to the podium to present item RE431 to us, Henefer Town. Okay. Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay, could I ask for the company to get on to make sure we can hear them? Yeah, I see them. Brian, are you there?
Brian Dieter, are you online?
Yeah. Brian, Mayor Richens, are you there?
Yes, sir. There we go. Sorry, had to unmute.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, so much for joining us. We'll hear Russell's presentation, and then we'd invite you to share information with the board as well. Go ahead, Russell.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is for Henefer Town. Proposed project is located in Henefer Town in Summit County. In November 2019, Henefer Town requested financial assistance from the board to install a pressurized and metered secondary water system. The project also included lining 2 segments of the main canal owned by the Henefer Irrigation Company. The town is a shareholder in the company, and the saved water will help supply the town's proposed secondary system. The original plan also included constructing a head pond and pump station to pressurize the proposed secondary system. Since that time, it decided to install a transmission pipeline to the base of Echo Reservoir to gravity pressurize the system rather than installing the pump station and head pond. And that is shown on this map, the pipeline running up to Echo. Last year, the applicant applied for and received a loan from the Division of Drinking Water to cover the cost of this pipeline. Therefore, the pipeline will not be considered part of this project, and the Board of Water Resources is being asked to provide funding only for the installation of the secondary system and canal lining. A Water Smart grant of $1.5 million has been approved for the project. In addition, the applicant is applying for a water optimization grant from the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food for $423,000. If the UDAF grant is not awarded, and it is expected to be announced in August, the applicant may return to the board for additional funding. The project was put out to bid recently, and the bids are significantly higher than the initial estimate. Thus, the applicant is requesting an additional $661,000 in funding from the board. Okay, and as shown in this slide, this is still the secondary system being requested and the pipelining there on the main ditch and ditch lining. Big ditch and main ditch is the lining there. Okay, for the cost sharing and repayment, the authorized and proposed cost sharing are as follows. The authorized amount was the board providing $1,496,000, Bureau of Reclamation grant of $1,500,000. And the applicant would provide $2,264,000 for a total of $3,260,000. With the new higher amount, we're looking at, the board is being requested a loan of $2,157,000. Bureau of Reclamation grant remains the same at $1,500,000. The UDAF grant, we're figuring in at $423,000, assuming they will get it. And the applicant will provide $380,000 for a total project cost of $4,460,000. At authorization, the board agreed to provide 45.9% of the cost, up to $1,496,000, and stated that the bonded indebtedness was to be returned at 1% interest over 25 years, with annual payments of approximately $71,000, including reserves. With the new funding, staff recommends the board reauthorize and commit funds for 48.4% of the project cost, up to $2,157,000, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 30 years, with annual payments of approximately $87,000, including reserves. That is staff's comment.
Thank you, Russell. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Dieter and Mayor Richens. Is there anything that you would like to add or share with the board?
Well, we appreciate you folks funding us, and we truly hope that you will see this is something we truly need, and will see fit to help us get the funds that we need to finish this project.
Great. Thank you. All right, with that, does the board have any questions for the applicant or for Russell?
Madam Chair, this is Kyle Stevens. I'll be prepared to make a motion. Just mention, as I mentioned in the briefing meeting, this is an area in which I grew up, but I don't currently have any conflict of interest, and so I'd be able to make a motion in support of this project. But I have a question for Mayor Richens. And I asked this in the previous briefing meeting, what do your prospects look like for obtaining the water optimization grant from the Department of Ag?
Answer that.
Go ahead.
So we are in the USDA Service Center in Ogden right now. We've been stepping back and forth between monitoring this meeting and a meeting with UDAF. So we're here meeting with Ryan Christensen about that, and he's helping us fill out that grant application and making sure that we get it in the best shape we can get it into before we submit it. So I would say we have a very good chance. I should say Henefer has a very good chance.
Yes, I would think so.
Okay, thank you. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll make the motion that the board reauthorize and commit funds for 48.4% of the project cost, up to $2,157,000, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 30 years, with annual payments of approximately $87,000, including reserves.
All right, thank you very much. Moved by Kyle Stevens.
Second to the motion, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Seconded by Charles Holmgren. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, thank you. I rule that that item is approved. Thank you. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. So Russell, you've got 2 withdrawals to share with us. So I guess I'll invite you back up. Russell, not so fast. RE 443 and RL 577. Oh, that's right. Okay. 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 Okay, super. All right, and while Russell's coming back up, I will just note that we have some additional guests with us here today that would like to make comment on some of the agenda items. So I'll invite you gentlemen up when we get to those agenda items. But Rick Smith, I saw, was here, General Manager for Davis and Weber County's Canal Company, and Dean Lindell, Finance Director for Lehigh City. So thanks for joining us, gentlemen, and we'll invite you up on the agenda items that you've requested to speak on. All right, withdrawals.
Just curious, did you need me to comment on these?
I think you can just tell us what projects they are specifically, and then we can.
Okay, Sunrise and Bench Creek Irrigation Company, they don't need our money after all. They got lower bids and a little extra money lined up, so they don't need it. St. George City, this pipeline down to the Ledges area has long been forgotten or something. So.
Thank you, Russell. Are there any questions on these? Great. All right, with that, then I would just be looking for a motion to formally withdraw these projects.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board withdraw RE 443 Sunrise Bench Creek Irrigation Company and RL 577 St. George City from further consideration by the board.
All right, thank you. Moved by Spencer Jones. Is there a second? Great.
Madam Chair, I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Seconded by Blaine Ibsen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Those items have been withdrawn. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll just note that we have a couple of new applications that will be under consideration that we'll be hearing about later. RE 468 Liberty Pipeline Company in Weber County, RE 467 Grantsville Irrigation Company in Tooele County, and RE 470 Eden Waterworks Company in Weber County. Okay, our next agenda item then is additional funds for the secondary meter grant program, and Marissa Egbert is going to be sharing a proposed strategy for prioritization.
Thank you. I'm just gonna, I might freak out the staff in the back, the AV staff. I'm switching computers. They're not on mic, so we can't hear the colorful words they might be saying about what I just did without giving them warning.
Marissa, if you see a blue screen in front of you, the connection's not working yet.
Okay,
We see a blue screen.
I see a blue screen.
And that's okay. Perhaps we can just start with the kind of background.
I'll read the summary.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
So the summary is in the board folder, and we wanted to give some background of how we got to the prioritization process, because we had not used the prioritization in previous application periods. So this is for the third application period. We had, I can't remember, 15 or 19 applications in the third round. 3 of those were looking for additional funds. They'd already received ARPA money. We were able to help them through the, I apologize. I can open my email on the other one. 3 of those applications, we were able to help them out with funding, grant funding from the small secondary system funds to make that work. I'm really sorry, Paul. I'll get the other laptop back. Let me get the other laptop back, I'm sorry.
Windows is freaked out.
Okay, I can hook this back in. I really apologize. If anyone wants to start the Jeopardy theme song, we could do that.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got it here on this laptop. We can, if we switch back, will it freak out again? Let's find out. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
sorry about that.
Excellent. I feel like maybe we should have Paul just work on the prioritization too. No, you're great. You're
Paul,
just great.
Come
You're
explain this,
so
please, for us.
technically
We'd
helpful.
really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. I'm going to see if I can.
Make it look so easy.
Yeah, there we go. So we wanted to give a background on this in the code and the legislation for the ARPA funding. There is information on how to prioritize projects. And we have not had to use that prioritization for previous application periods. Alrighty. I downloaded it enough, so that's good. It's not the right one, though. Sorry. Oh, it's back to right-handed, and I'm used to it being left-handed. That's not the one? Okay. I don't know why it's not the right thing. Shoot. I thought I was going to have this figured out just slick. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, just a second, please.
Maybe, Marissa is just because I'm a little bit closer to this, because I was chatting with Marissa about this yesterday. So in your packets, there is the summary, right, about kind of how we've gotten to where we are. And as we've mentioned, we haven't deployed the prioritization yet, but for this new monies, and you'll correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, right, Candace? But basically, we're expecting to have about $41 million available, and so far we have $67 million in requests, and so
from the third round.
Yeah. So in this round, we need to move on to actually deploying the prioritization, and you'll get to sharing this with us. But I do think it's really important to note, and as is documented in the packet, that the statute is quite prescriptive on what we use in prioritization. I don't feel like we have a lot of flexibility to go outside of what the statute is asking us to look at in prioritization. And I think that's where I can turn it over to Marissa to go through.
This is so weird. This is the right one. I think I know what happened. No, it's me. It's not the thing. Can you fix me?
I'm pretty sure that Taylor Swift wrote a song about that.
Would you sing it in the meantime, please? I would appreciate that. I think wasn't Candace going to sing something?
Yeah, I think
I'm
Candace
good.
was actually offering karaoke earlier.
I tried to open the wrong thing. Hey.
Oh, that's right.
Can I go sit back down, have Russell come up, do the withdrawals just one more time? Let's just do a redo here. Woo! I'm going to close this so we don't all get fixated on that just at the moment, okay? Legislative summary, and this is in the board folder. In the 2011 legislative session, $50 million from the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, funds were allocated to the Board of Water Resources to provide grants to secondary water suppliers to install meters. In addition, the board was directed to adopt rules for these funds and adopted R65310. Section R65310-2 -3 number 2 indicates that a secondary water supplier with 7,000 secondary water connections or fewer may receive no more than $5 million in grant funds. A secondary water supplier with more than 7,000 secondary water connections may receive no more than $10 million in grant funds. In the 2022 legislative session, legislation was passed that requires pressurized secondary water suppliers to meter all secondary connections, and that's in Code 73-10-34, and allocated an additional $200 million in ARPA funds to provide grant funds to install secondary meters. So we've always talked about the $250 million. It's two different allocations, $50 million and $200 million. The law included the same requirements for their maximum limit of the grant amounts and prioritization that the board adopted in Rule 653-10 and codified it for the additional funds. During a third application period, applicants that had previously received the maximum limit of the ARPA funds from the $200 million allocation could apply again for additional grant funding. And so all of the $200 million has been obligated out, and part of the $50 million has been. It says the code requires the Division of Water Resources to review and prioritize applications and make recommendations to the board regarding grant amounts. The division is required to rank the applicants based on the following weighted factors: 60% weight based on the ratio of estimated water use reduction divided by total state investment, 20% weight based on the applicant facing current or potential water shortages when installation of meters and subsequent water use reductions will result in delaying or eliminating the need for new water development. We called this shortages. And the factor, and then 20% weight, based on the project's accelerated construction schedule, prompt start, and prompt finish. And to summarize those a little bit better, what we were looking at is bang for the buck. How much money is the board going to invest compared to how much water is going to be conserved? On the shortages, it's who has the higher need because their shortages are going to be sooner. And so we looked at that. And the last one is the accelerated construction schedule, prompt start. So this is more than boots in the ground. This is shovels in the ground, and are they up and running? Or when will they be up and running? So priority going to those that can conserve more water for less money. Priority given to those that have shortages and more need now, and higher priority going to those that are ready to go and ready to move on this. So the current status is we ended up with 8 applications, all of which these applicants have received funding already. The total amount requested was $67 million. Several of them, requested the maximum again of $10 million. But ARPA grant funds available at this time we think is around $41 million. I think it's about $41 million. So what we did, and have been trying to wrap our heads around how to do this. We came up, because engineers use spreadsheets, and thankfully we have an economist who geeks out on these too. This is a dummy spreadsheet. This is not actual numbers. We wanted to be able to explain a little easier how we went through this process. Now, it's important to note, and we don't have all of our columns in here, all of these things that we need to prioritize were something that was in the application from the applicant. So the amount of acre feet conserved, the amount of money they're requesting to do that project, will they have shortages? If so, when will the shortages be? And when is construction going to start? When is construction going to end? Those were all in the application, and we use those numbers. So again, these are just dummy, prettier numbers. We've got 8 applicants here, and we said, okay, this is how much they're going to conserve. And I want to make a note about this. When we first receive applications, we made sure to go through, and Candace helped start this. She would write an email and say, why is the conservation number so high? Or why is the cost per meter so high? And so we started we made sure to keep track of that. What we found is on some of these larger projects, on the application, they gave an overall water conservation number, savings, but then there was also on the application, how much per lot, how many acre feet per lot is going to be used before meters and after meters. So those numbers didn't always match up. The amount conserved, when talking with some back in August, they had put the amount conserved for all of their meters that they were going to put in, not the ones on that particular application. We used the numbers on the before and after, the how much acre feet difference is going to be saved per lot, and then multiplied that by the number of meters they're expecting to install on that application. We could go through and try to get the nitty-gritty, but we had to find some way to compare what we had. They all had the same application, and so some of the conservation numbers that we had were high. We went back and looked at that, and we did adjust some of those numbers to make it more reasonable and make it more what we believe is really going to happen. They're not really going to conserve 4,000 acre feet with 4,000 meters. They're going to probably do 1,000 acre feet, but we checked that with their numbers on the application. So I'm just giving you a heads up on that. So we then took the amount conserved and then the grant requests. Like I said, several asked for 10 million. There were a few that asked for less than the 10 million. And we said, okay. And this is where Juliet, or excuse me, our chair, helped me out in coming up with how to rank this. One thing we did in February in our board meeting, we asked the board, we have 8 applications. We can't fill them all. Do you want us to take the top 5 and fulfill as much as that, fulfill what their request is, and the remaining get 0? Or do you want us to spread it out? And you asked us to spread it out and make sure everybody gets something. So these are not ranked 1 through 8. These are ranked in a different way. So what we did is we looked and said, okay, how many acre feet per $10,000 investment? So we came up with these numbers here. So dividing, let me make sure I get this right, how many acre feet divided by the grant request, which we are taking as the state's investment. Then what we did on that is we said, okay, we have to compare all of these to each other. Instead of being 1 through 8, sorry, now the laptop's backwards on me. In comparing, instead of saying it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we tried to compare them to each other. So what we did, that's not a very good one right there. Let me change it. Well, that didn't help me. Okay, so what we did is we came up with, why is that? I don't know why that's messed up there. I don't know, Juliet, can you help me quickly because I only had one of them at 100. Okay, hopefully that should work. Our numbers still work over there. Or 10,000. Yeah.
What the statute's asking, and the statute says water use reduction divided by state investment. So that's kind of what that is what that number is. And then the most acre feet per $10,000 of investment is the applicant A. And again, this is just their made up numbers, but is applicant A. And so that's the maximum. And so they would get full points. So 60% weighting, they'd get 100% of full points.
Yep.
And then, for example, the applicant H at the very bottom, they are, they're 1,000 acre feet for $10,000 of investment. So, 20% of what the
Compared to the highest.
the highest. And so the proposal is that they would get 20% of 60 points.
Or 12 points. And that's for the conservation portion. We then, any questions on that? Okay. The timeline, we were really excited about because all 8 said this is ongoing, and we even said, when will you be finished? 7 said by December 2026, and 1 said when the funding runs out. Well, the ARPA funding runs out at the latest December 2026. So, because we can't use it anymore. So we said, you know what? They all are on the same level, this 1.0 of where they are, they're ongoing construction, they're ready to go, and they're gonna get this completed. So each of them got a 1.0 score, and you multiply that by the 20 points. We switched it from 60%, 20%, 20% to 60 points, 20 points, and 20 points. So on a scale of 100. So they all got 20. And then we come over here to shortage. Most of them had a shortage of 2022, which was the year the ARPA funding started. And then a couple of them said no shortage, and then a couple of them had some different years in them. What we did is, let me make sure I say this right. We were trying to figure out how to rank these, and we said, let's look at a planning year of 2060. So between 2022 and 2060, there's 38 years. If they said they have a shortage in 2022, meaning right now, we're going to take their number of 2022, subtract it from the 2060, and that's 38 years. So we took the 38 years of that window divided by the 38 years that they had said they have a shortage. I don't know if I explained that well. So we're trying to compare how quickly the need is for them. The ones that said no shortages, we gave a 0. So that's what happened there, and you can see that on a couple of these. We gave 0. So when you multiply out, they got 0 points on that. There were a couple that had different years. So if they had a year of, was it 2045? 2045, you take 2060 minus 2045, what they had in their application, that's 15 years. You take that 15 years, divide it by 38. And that's where we came up with, I think it's that one right there. And so that's where we came up with a score, which we then multiplied by 20. So if you come over here, you add up all the scores, you add up the conservation points, you add up the timeline points, the shortage points, you get the points here. I'm going to let you explain this. This is your column. Oh, no, I know this.
We have to do something if we're not, again, if we're not just going to just go down that fully fund down the list, if we are going to, continue down this path of trying to provide funding, at some level for all of the applicants, then you have to kind of figure out, well, how do you distribute funding across all applicants? And so basically we look at the total score, and then we add those total, I know there's a little nuance in here, and Marissa can help to explain this in a minute, but essentially the concept is, well, you add the total scores up, and then for each applicant, their share of the total score is the share of the funding that they get. So again, if, so it should be that the applicant with the highest score will get the highest share of the funding. But this allows us to distribute the funding across all applicants. Again, the other alternative would be to just cut off funding at, at some number. But in this case, I think that, Marissa, you might want to explain, but the top score, actually the funding that would be distributed through that approach would give more funding than what they're requesting. And so in this method, what we would do would be to provide 100% funding, like what the total funding they've requested. Yeah, and then just pull them out of the analysis and then move on to the others in the same approach where we add their total scores together, and then for each, in that case, the applicant with the highest points would get the highest share within that group.
So we, what we did is we took the 70.3 and divided it by the total of these. We did not include the score for that one that got 100. And that's where we came up with these percentages. We did that for each one of these, and that's where we were able to come up with, okay, 100% for those that are left. Now they're not getting 16.78% of what they requested. They're getting 16.78% of the remaining funds. So we take out the 2 million. So in this one, we said there's $30 million left, and 59 million requested. So in this one, 30 million, we said, okay, we're gonna take out the 2 million from that top one. So there's 28 million left for these other 7. And we said 28 million times 16.76, 28 million times 21.49. So it's not a percentage of what they requested, it's a percentage of what's left in the funding. So as you can see, these 7 add up to the 28, and if you go one more, they add up to the 30 million. And then if you want to compare, I moved this column over here, I copied this column. So that top one got the total amount they requested. These requested 4.7. They requested 7 million. They would get 4.7 million. These requested 6 million. That's not quite right. I'll have to figure that. Oh, Yeah, that's the grant. I'll have to figure that one out. Sorry, we're
These are
still
kind of
trying
dummy,
to.
yeah, these are, I think.
These are dummy numbers.
They're
and
dummy numbers, so.
We're still
yeah.
trying to make this work. But basically, after the top ranked applicant, the rest of them, we divvy up the number based on this percentage. We divvy up the remaining funds. So in the actual case, say we're 41.5 million, or 42 million, you take out 2 million, you divide the remaining 40 million amongst those 7 with their percentages. So these are not the percentages that we have in reality. But I wanted you to see the difference in some of these scores, because one of them had a really low request, and they're going to conserve the water. And we checked all of those conservation numbers to make sure we felt comfortable with it. And Juliet asked me, how could this be so different? And I said, it could be lot size, and because of the lot size, they have a different size meter. And I was blown away when I started seeing cost of meters. The cost of meter does not go linearly with the size of the meter. It jumps incredibly in cost from the 1 inch to the 1.5 inch. So there's other factors that are in that. We did not go through cost estimates. We went with what's on their application, but we did make adjustments to those conservation, how much they said they conserve, but we made sure it matched something else on their application that they had on there. So, are we all enthralled? I hope that's less clunky than what my staff heard on Monday, so in our section meeting. So what we're asking the board to do is to approve the prioritization and ranking process. And Blaine, the word process is not in the folder there, but we're looking for that. So we do not have final numbers right now. We do expect to get these very soon. The motion, it's not part of the motion, but the paragraph said to be presented in the August board meeting. That's the earliest they would be presented. So that's the project managers working with them. Some of them already have enough, have a bunch of money going on, but that's the earliest that we could bring it before the board.
I think in terms of process or even kind of approach methodology, I think that's what we're really, again, I'd invite Marissa or Candace to correct me if I'm misstating this, but what we're really, I think, trying to provide some guidance here on is in the approach and kind of the interpretation of the statute for example, the applicant facing current or potential water shortages when installation of the meters or subsequent water use reductions will result in delaying or eliminating the need for new water development. And again, as Marissa has explained it, the approach there is to look at a planning period and award, the most weight or points to those projects that are facing imminent shortage, and then less points where the shortage is further out within the planning period. And so are we comfortable with that planning period? And then on the weight based on a project's accelerated construction schedule, prompt start and prompt finish, again, the division here is recommending to us that the approach is essentially that all projects are essentially
ongoing.
Getting equal treatment given the information that they've provided to us on prompt start, prompt finish. And then on the conservation piece, I think, to be honest with you, I think that one's pretty well reflects what the statute says. It doesn't feel like there's like a lot of interpretation there. But I think I feel like that's kind of what the board should be weighing in on at this point.
It's just taken time to figure out how to turn, especially that conservation one, into some sort of point system where, there's a huge jump you can see on here from 1 to 2. But then, we don't want it be 1 through 8 where the incremental steps are equal, because they're not.
Yeah.
We wanted it to reflect the real differences that there are.
That's good. So questions? I know that we have some public comment that we'll take, but before we go there, questions for Marissa?
Madam Chair and Marissa, would you be comfortable sending copies of this to the board, or is this proprietary or copyright protected that you don't want it to go that far?
I don't know. The example one? Okay, yeah.
I think I can wrap my mind around it
I know.
better if I can sit and look at it.
Charlie, I don't know how many months ago Shalane, Joel, and I sat in a room trying to start this whole thing, and I was wrapping it around, I was wrapping up calculations at 2 a.m. this morning. And sending an email to Juliet saying, I think I figured it out.
I would say Charles, what you're suggesting, I think makes a lot of sense. I'm a little bit ahead of everyone else because Marisa shared this with me yesterday. So I feel like I'm a little, I'm a little farther ahead.
A couple hours to figure it out. It's taken me
no,
months.
It's all good. But like, I feel like, again, I think that depending on how your brain works, it might be helpful for you to have it and,
Yeah.
play with it. Yeah. Because that's how my
You
brain
bet. Great question, Charlie.
Yeah.
Any other easy softball question?
I just want to make sure, again, I know the answer, but I just want to make sure that because I don't want to make any assumptions here. Again, that 60, 20, 20, those percentages are actually in the code,
They are in the
right?
code.
Yeah, so I just want to be, that's very, very respectful of what the legislature has asked us.
And I can read it again.
No, it's here.
Okay. All right.
Just making sure.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I think maybe if it's okay with the board, we'll invite public comment as has been requested. And so we'll ask Mr. Rick Smith if you want to come up first. There he is back there.
Someone has questions about this comment?
Davis and Weber Counties Canal Company, General Manager. Great to see you. And thanks always for your good thinking about all of this. I know it's helpful.
First of all, I want to thank staff for all the effort they've been putting in. It's quite a yeoman's task for all of us to try to accomplish what's been mandated. And we're one of those entities that are probably running faster than we can actually keep up. And so going back to the requirements of prioritization, those 3 items, I hate to say it, but they're all unknowns. If you consider the cost per connection, obviously it's going to vary. We have several that are 6-inch connections. We have thousands of 1-inch connections. So that variable's huge. Every entity is going to be different because if you have 100 meters versus 10,000 meters, potentially that cost per unit is going to be very different. So again, we're trying to compare apples to apples, which I think you're going to have every type of fruit out there to compare against each other, because that's why the numbers are so skewed, is that I can compare my numbers with someone literally in the same city, and we're going to be completely different because of our assumptions, the numbers that we're working with, the different contractors, suppliers, the list keeps going on. Same with the acre feet saved per connection. Who knows, right? One person could be watering 200% too much, right? So we might have a huge savings on one person, and someone else would just get a fraction or 0. So again, we all made our best guess, assuming certain things, and even we had a 30% assumption is what we put in there because we don't know. Because we have put meters on people, but we didn't know what to use before. So again, how do you even figure out what that baseline is and how much you actually saved? So again, these are very difficult assumptions and questions. Same with water shortage. If you told me 3 or 4 years ago we're going to go through the worst drought in 2 years, 21, 22, you could have guessed. And then what? This year we have just the opposite. We can fill our major reservoirs 3 or 4 times. So again, how you plan that out is, again, it's very unknown. The other thing, costs are going up. I actually just got a quote. So I have a quote from last year, May 22nd, I think it is, for some meter pits, and they're in that 540 range. Today's, that same pit is $660. So it went from 540 to 660. Again, I think there's a supply and demand problem as well, and also just even the supply chain. So we jumped on this, as you well know, early on, and again, are on the bleeding edge a little bit. So we still have customers today that have not received water yet because we're still trying to get the meters in. We have the meter pit in, but we're still finishing the meters. So again, some of that was because we were ahead of the game. We got pits in. Meters finally showed up in February. And so again, we are also, we've roughly got 750, 800 meters already in at the cost of about $2 million we've already spent to date. But of previous projects, this is already, we put in 6 months what we did in 2 years. in previous projects. So that's the acceleration that we're looking at, which again has its own growing pains and issues that we have to deal with. And I kind of cheated and listened into your work meeting. That's why I'm here, just give comments. I know one question was, what if we don't get the full amount? Well, I've already gone to 5 cities this year and increased our user rates by 20%. Again, because we don't know what the future holds in paying for these future grants, or without grants, future meter installations. So again, we'll have to adapt either way. And as you well know, I've also beat the drum at the legislature to get more funding. I was actually in President Adams' office this last year on another project. He goes, anything else we can do for you? I said, how about more money for meters? He said, well, install what we've done, and then we'll consider more money. But again, we are in that arena trying to do that. And lastly, again, I don't think we have a choice. It's a mandate, and so we are actively pushing to get these meters in with its own growing pains and people emailing Speaker Wilson and others complaining about this process, but we are doing our best. So again, thank you for your funding. We appreciate it. And like I said, we've already spent $2 million in roughly 6 months. So again, in that pace, we're already considering potentially having 2 contractors this next time instead of just 1 contractor in a year, which again, physically for us to try to keep up with a limited staff is difficult. So.
Better jump on those contractors because I heard others are doing the same.
Yes.
All right.
So we've already bid out, we're already doing this other one, and we're bidding out the next month for our next October through October.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it. If you don't mind, I know that this is, we've invited this public comment given, and you've asked to make the public comment, but just because, and hopefully Mr. Lindell would be open to this as well, but just because you are an expert in this area, you're implementing this and an expert, I think it's kind of germane to what we're talking about right now. I'd like to does the board have any questions for Mr. Smith? Okay.
Madam Chair, just a quick one for Rick. Do you have an alternative to what's been presented today, or, we're trying to get to where.
I think they've done what they can. I mean, how do you decide?
Yeah.
Like I said, I can save 0.1 acre feet or 10 acre feet, right, per connection. If it's a park versus a 0.1 acre lot. So it depends on what you're looking at. So each one of these has a spectrum of variables. Unfortunately, you're just trying to do the best you can in creating a process, which again is, if we get 2 million or 5 million or 10 million, we'll take it. It's because we're having to increase our rates already, and we plan to increase them more if we don't get further grants.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you. All right. We'll invite Dean Lindell. Great to see you, Mr. Lindell, with Lehigh City.
And I'll just take a minute. I appreciate the board's time, and I'll just give you a little update on our project so far. We're moving ahead. We're buying all the parts we can possibly find. That was a little bit of a problem at first, that we couldn't. Our contractor was actually keeping up and keeping ahead of pace, but we couldn't supply them with parts fast enough. We've actually got to the point where we're buying a lot of things. We've rented 2 storage, like shipping container storage units, and even a semi-trailer truck, a trailer to store these parts so we can keep ahead of the contractor, and it's going very well. As far as the allocation method here, it makes sense to me. I think it's fair. I wasn't aware of the code regulations, and I think you're doing the best you can to be consistent with that. So I really appreciate that. Very much that everybody ought to get something rather than go from 1 to 0 and a few people get nothing. So again, I don't know where Lehigh would rank in any of this, but I think that the allocation's fair, and I appreciate your work to do that.
All right, thank you. And hopefully you're okay if we have any questions, just again, because this is like the opportunity we get to have someone who's on the ground implementing.
Absolutely, as long as you know I'm a money guy, not an engineering guy.
That's what I say.
If you ask me anything about how they're installed, I'll just look stupid.
Exactly what I say. Yeah. Any questions for Mr. Lindell? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so any other questions for Marissa or the staff? Yeah, go ahead.
Just want to make a comment. and Rick, I get it. Just last week, we were going over this yet again. And let me tell you how many times we've gone over this, trying to make sure we're following statute and being fair, knowing that the only thing we have are the applications. Now, if we sat down and called everybody, well, you got a really low score here. Can you do a little bit, So really a lot of effort. We're trying to make sure that this is a defensible process, that this process makes sense. So thank you. I'm glad to hear it makes sense. You should probably make sure you get the storage reimbursed through Tom, the storage unit. And the other thing on this last week, as we were going over it yet again, someone said, some of this is arbitrary. And I said, their application is arbitrary. And we said the very same thing. How do they know how much they're using eat per lot ahead? But I want to say every single application, I know the majority of them it was a 30% reduction. So in that regard, but we weren't comparing on that. We were comparing on the amount. So anyway, I just want to, I appreciate Rick coming here and being here. I appreciate Dean also doing the same. Just know that, and we know you all personally, and we're concerned and want to make sure we get it as right as possible. We may be comparing apples to oranges. We tried really hard to make sure they were apples. They may be different apples at McIntosh, Granny Smith, but we really tried. So. My comments are negative on it. No, I know they're not. I want you to know how concerned we have been about this, which is why I asked Juliet if we could talk, because she is the money person as far as economy, and why we spent a couple more hours worrying about this just even a couple days ago, and then both of us last night, still trying to make sure we had. So anyway, that's all. I just want to make comment just for that. No, I did not take those negative at all. Yeah, appreciate that.
So I think I'm trying to kind of figure out how to manage this. I know that the division would like, I think some sort of motion just to help you move forward, but I want to balance that against giving all of us a little time to look at this, like look at the nuts and bolts of this. I don't know, I'm kind of looking even to Candace. If we were to generally approve approach methodology, generally, is there an opportunity for us to come back and give you concern, if something pops as a concern, how should we handle this?
Yeah, and I haven't
timing pressure.
Yeah, I haven't conferred with my staff, but I feel like this is important that we get it right, and it's important that you guys all feel comfortable with it. So I liked Board Member Holmgren's suggestion of sending out this spreadsheet, giving you guys a little time with it. We can bring it back. The June meeting is not that far away. Okay. And if we're not going to get them on the board scheduled till maybe August.
At the earliest.
At the earliest. Okay. Then I feel like I would prefer to give you guys a little bit of extra time to make sure you're comfortable with the process. We can also hammer out any, make sure we're square on it as well. And that'd be my thoughts.
Maybe we can, Juliet, and have her share it with some of her economy friends.
Happy to.
And the other thing, we've been anxious to get this information so that they can do their planning and have an idea of where they are from grant money. So that is something Shalane brought up a month or so ago. We've got to get some information to them so they can. So that's part of where we are as well, just trying to balance that. I think you could ask the two that are here what their need is in, as far as, is August okay at the earliest? I know another system talked to Tom, and it sounded like August at the earliest was okay with them. Yeah. So, yeah.
Why don't we handle it this way? Why don't we not, and I'll just kind of look to the board because alternative proposals are fine, but why don't we refrain from taking formal action on anything today? Not that we were going to actually approve numbers, but even maybe refrain from taking formal action on this approach. This approach has been presented. The division can share it with us. And I think that what we should do is we should take a closer look at it as soon as possible. And if things are really problematic, we should flag that for the division like right away. And then I would just say the division should kind of continue to move forward, assuming that we'll land here, but flag it for you all, in the next 2 weeks or so. We have something else coming up where we need to get some feedback to you ASAP. So we could flag it individually for you. And then you could let us know if you start to get feedback from the applicants that, again, we're not talking about the actual approval of dollars now, but if you're hearing from the applicants for their planning purposes, they need to have an idea of how we're moving forward on this sooner than the June meeting. Perhaps we could try to organize a quick special virtual meeting. Is that?
Should we ask the two applicants in the room?
Yeah, sure, go ahead, Shalane, yeah. Just want to make sure it's fairly technical what we're dealing with, and I have the advantage of having seen it with a little,
And I think, what we were looking for today was just an approval of our process. But I understand this is complicated for everybody, and we're all trying to wrap our head around it. I don't know that it's necessary. I don't know that there's a single applicant who's bumping up against using all of their funding. They just, yes, they do have funding. They're working on their projects, but they're able to continue as long as they know we're working in this direction, and they've all been informed that their applications are eligible for additional funds. We just don't know how much yet. So I think if you're all comfortable waiting to take an official motion until June, we can wait for that. We've heard from you that have concerns, or that in general it sounds reasonable, but you want to look at something a little more closely. So we'll get this information out to you. Wait for responses. But in the meantime, let these applicants know there will be something. Most of you, it's not going to be the full amount you requested. So I think they can start making their plans, knowing that there will be additional funds. And then hopefully in the August meeting, we'll see if we can get things together. We'll know both grant and additional loan amounts that could be needed. So I think we're okay waiting for an official motion on the process until the June meeting, if that would make you all more comfortable.
Kind of looking, I know that we prepared to make a motion, but I think given some of the conversation, I'm looking at my colleagues, why don't we go ahead and do that? All right. Thanks so much for all of the work that you all put into this. And then also, I know that, again, we've got some actual participants in the program. So thank you for all of the work that you've put into this. And it's so wonderful that we have the opportunity to work this hard on something, because it will make a real impact. So.
And if I may, as far as staff's preparation for the August board meeting, it would just be changing a number.
Yes.
So that really won't be difficult. Whether or not the bond amount that they've requested might change, that is even something that, that could even hold off a little bit possibly, depending on, but each project manager can work with their applicant and follow and see where they are on that, so.
Awesome. I'm pretty confident. Again, I keep on saying, I have the benefit of being a little ahead on this, but I'm pretty confident that by June we should, as a board, feel like we're fully ready to move on this. So August should be great on our end, I'm assuming, but the actual implementation, I know, will take time. So, all right. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Marissa, and we'll look forward to getting like the spreadsheet, and then probably, I know you basically have this already, but a little bit of a write-up on how it's working. Great. All right, and then Shalane is going to, you've done a little bit of work, a follow-up from our last meeting on putting out an actual deadline.
Yes, Madam Chair. All this secondary meter talk, all the funding talk. Let's just continue that a little bit. So the board has authorized and committed over $200 million in the ARPA grant funds for secondary meter projects. These funds, as we've discussed, must be contracted by the end of 2024, spent by the end of 2026. Due to changes in the secondary meter law that happened this year, some applicants may not need their entire grant amount that you have provided. So the board would like to be able to use their allocated funds completely and has requested that maybe we set a deadline for applicants to decide whether to use their grant. So staff recommends that the board set a deadline of January 1st, 2024 for applicants to formally accept, reject, or request a modification to their existing grant. And that is all staff is asking you to do today, so that we can move forward and hopefully next year find out if there are still funds that need to be spent.
That's great. All right, well, thank you for bringing this before us, and look for a motion.
Madam Chair, before I make my motion on the previous discussion, I hope I'm not delaying things by asking those questions. Because between Marisa and the chair, I'm not going to be able to impact this at all. So I appreciate
Yes, you are, because you're a vote, so you are.
Yeah, I'm a vote.
Yeah.
But I trust these two people immensely. So anyway, with that.
But that is a good point, Charles. We want you all to be comfortable with it, not just Chairwoman Juliet. We want everyone to be comfortable.
I feel like it's a lot of responsibility for me to carry with y'all looking at it, but thank you.
Yeah, she sits there and goes, I think it's okay. You all should just vote for it.
No, I appreciate
We're
that.
fine waiting. Honestly, Charles, I don't think it'll change what we do internally at all.
Okay.
So it's
Good.
it's fine.
I feel better now.
Good. I feel better too.
All right, with that, I will, regarding the motion on secondary meter grant deadline, I will make the motion the board set a deadline of January 1, 2024 for applicants to formally accept, reject, or request a modification to their existing grant.
All right. Thank you. Motion made by Charles Holmgren. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second that.
Right.
And would also just like to add the comment before we vote that I think based on the previous discussions that we've just had, that will kind of set the precedent for allocating any available funds that may become available under this scenario.
Absolutely.
For moving forward. So good, healthy discussion, and thank you.
Great. Thank you for that second. Is there any other discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right. January 1st, 2024 has been approved as that deadline. Let's move on to our information items. Shalane, you're still up?
Yep, still here.
Capital Asset Management Plan rules.
Yes, so this one will require no action today. But in 2022, the legislature passed House Bill 269, which creates new requirements for capital asset management plans. And this law requires that wastewater service providers, retail water suppliers, and water conservancy districts with an annual operating budget of $5 million or less create a capital asset management plan as a condition of receiving state or federal funding to be used for capital asset improvements. Now, in that law, a capital asset is defined as a significant investment or an essential component necessary to provide water or wastewater service. So the bill directed the Board of Water Resources to adopt rules for water conservancy districts with the operating budget of $5 million or less. So we've worked with the AG's office, with Marty Bushman in particular, to draft these rules that are in your packet today. And what I would like you to do is take these over the next couple of weeks, review them thoroughly. Let me know if you have issues with anything. If you think anything is too onerous for the smaller districts, if you think that there's something not here that should be. please let me know, and we will work together to have something then prepared for the next board folder that you can adopt. So that's all I'm asking today, is to take some time to review these. Are there any questions right now? Yes, Kyle.
I have a question relative to, I thought about this earlier, but didn't ask it in our briefing meeting, but in the write-up, it says the law requires that wastewater service providers, retail water suppliers, and water conservancy districts with the annual operating budgets of $5 million or less. But over in the rule, it doesn't address water service providers or retail water suppliers. It only refers to water conservancy districts.
Right. So I kind of skipped over that part in my summary. The rules for wastewater service providers are being created by the Division of Water Quality.
You did mention that, okay.
And retail water suppliers are governed by the rules of the Division of Drinking Water.
Okay.
So that is also something that isn't in the rules currently, but we've had some internal discussion that we need to have a note somewhere.
They're being
whether it's
addressed in another section.
Yes, and also that if the board funds a drinking water project, it probably needs, their plan probably needs to be approved by the Division of Drinking Water as well.
And that we need to have some type of method in place to verify that they do in fact meet that requirement.
Yes, yes. And just so you're aware, I compare it this way. When the board funds a drinking water project currently, or even secondary, if it might affect the drinking water system, we require that plans and specs be approved by the Division of Drinking Water. You don't necessarily see that requirement unless you read through all the requirements we send to the applicants when we've authorized funds, but that is one of the requirements that we have internally. So I assume we'll apply this the same way, but if that's something you want actually written into the rules, we'll figure out a way. I'll work with Marty and we'll get that written into the rules.
I don't know that it needs to be. I just, raised that as a question, and if I'd have read further down, you clarified the fact that the other entities are responsible for putting those rules together.
Yes.
Too, so.
Yep. Yeah, and drinking water had a whole bunch of fun because once they started working on their rules, then they had to get involved with, I think, the EPA, and they had to be satisfied because they do have federal funds come through their programs. So, yeah, having state funds primarily, we get it a little bit easier.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shalane. And I will, as I mentioned in our briefing meeting, just point out that June 1st is coming up quickly, so please take a look at these closely.
Well, and I think what I'll do is I will send a separate
Perfect.
email
Thank
to
you.
all
That
of
would be
you
great.
with this attached, so you can
Reminder.
make any comments or suggestions that you would like. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we'll invite Todd Stoneley up to give us our the Watershed Council's update. Thanks, Todd.
I think this is the computer I put my presentation on, but we'll see. Yeah, there it is. Okay, excellent. All right, so we're excited to give you an update on watershed councils. There's been lots of activity going on. At Water Users Workshop, if you were there and attended my presentation, there's several local watershed councils that were getting prepared to be certified by the statewide council, and that has occurred, so I'm going to give you an update on those things. I love this graphic by Pat Bagley in the Salt Lake Tribune from 2017. This kind of epitomizes why we need watershed councils, because there's a little bit of water there on the table and everyone wants a piece of it. And if we're not talking to each other about it,
I do too. That's right.
it might not work out the way we want it to. So just a quick review on the Watershed Councils Act. The purpose is to develop diverse and balanced stakeholder forums for discussion of water policy and resource issues at watershed and state levels. Some of the other important details are that councils are not vested with regulatory, infrastructure financing, or enforcement powers or responsibilities. And councils are encouraged to use local expertise and resources found in universities and other research institutions or regional, state, and federal agencies. So the Utah Watersheds Council is the statewide council that was set up per the requirements of the Act. And they have been meeting since last January of 2022. They had their first meeting then, have met quarterly since then. And their role is to serve as a forum, similar to what the language said before, to encourage and facilitate discussion and collaboration by and among the stakeholders relative to the water-related interests of the state and the state's people and institutions. They are to facilitate communication and coordination between the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Agriculture and Food, and the Department of Environmental Quality, and other state and federal agencies in the implementation of water-related activities. They also help to facilitate the establishment of local watershed councils by certifying a local council. They provide resources and support for the administration of local councils. They consult and seek guidance from local councils, and they provide advice to the governor and legislature on water issues. All right, my screen froze here, not letting me advance. So let me try something. There we go. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Just kind of froze for a second. Sorry, the bottom of this is cut off, but I can see it on my screen. So the Utah Watersheds Council is made up of these following individuals. The DNR Executive Director, who currently is Joel Ferry. So whenever these people are replaced, they are automatically, by virtue of their position, appointed to the council. The Executive Director of Department of Environmental Quality, the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture and Food, the Director of the Utah Division of Indian Affairs, the USU Extension Vice President, and the Director of the Division of Emergency Management. So those are all positions that whoever fills that position is automatically a member of this statewide council. The next three are representatives designated by the various entities throughout the state. The Utah Association of Counties is that first one. That's currently filled by Victor Iverson, a representative designated by the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and one designated by the Utah Association of Special Districts. That is Corey Cram currently, and he's our chair. He's the chair of the statewide council at the moment. Then there's a representative of reclamation projects, and these last representative ones are all kind of chosen by the governor based on some nominations of various interest groups that they represent. So Representative of Reclamation Projects and Scott Paxman, he's our vice chair. Representative of Agriculture, Val J. Rigby, et cetera, on down the list there. And the year after the original law was passed, they added a water attorney representative, and that is Warren Peterson, a former member of this board. Many of you know him. And then there's a representative that will be appointed to the statewide council by each to represent the interests or represent each of the local watershed councils. So the Bear River Watershed Council has received a certification, conditional certification by the state council, and they've appointed Nate Doggs to be the representative on the Utah Watersheds Council. He's the Cache County Water District General Manager. And the one that's not shown there at the bottom is all the other local watershed councils can determine and appoint their representative once they are certified. So to give you an update where we are on the local watershed councils formation, the Bear River Watershed Council began meeting in March and then formally came together in April. The Jordan River Watershed Council has been not necessarily meeting yet, but they got conditional approval or certification from the State Council based on certain things that they have to do and meet, also in the April meeting of the State Council. So both of those two are well on their way to functioning and starting to do their work. There's several others in the Great Salt Lake Basin, the Weber River Watershed Council, Utah Lake Watershed Council, that are going to be formed in the next few weeks, if not days. And the West Desert and Great Salt Lake Watershed Councils will follow later this summer. And the reason those kind of all rose to the top was because the Great Salt Lake issues are so of very much interest. There's lots of things going on, and we wanted to get those underway so that they could start discussing the issues that come before the various state agencies and help us with our planning that we're doing. The Great Salt Lake Basin Integrated Plan, for instance. And then I think in the agenda, the Sevier River was noted as being likely this fall. I put a question mark behind that, and that got put on the agenda incorrectly. It might happen late this year. But I think on that one, we've learned some information that we'll probably be putting the brakes on that one, at least initially, and likely that will come later, which means the Uinta will probably happen later this year or early next year, and then be the next one on the priority list. Oops. So I don't know if any of you like The Mandalorian. Our good friend Peter Gessel put this slide together with help of one of his children. I guess this is a meme out there that you can put whatever you want on this. And this is just kind of funny. He went to the Uinta Basin and presented on watershed councils and put Uinta Basin there and says, I got to get one of those watershed councils, which is kind of cool, I think. He's he's advocating for that and encouraging people to get on board. Anyway, so that concludes my presentation, and you can get more information about watershed councils and where we're at with those on our website at the address shown. Of course, you can reach out to me with any questions or concerns you might have. And with that, that's my report.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Any questions? Go ahead, Blaine.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to just back up what Todd said. I had a visit with Todd this morning, and the water rights owners on the Sevier River, as an overwhelming majority, have serious reservations about this, and so I think it is appropriate to meet with them and put the brakes on and make sure this is done right with the water users.
Good. It's wise. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to the next update. It's all the good work on this. Okay, we'll turn the time over to Director Hassenjaeger. Got a lot of some cool stuff to share.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could I just,
Please.
I have a public meeting at 6 o'clock in Delta. If I could be excused, it's 2.5 hours if traffic is good and I don't want a speeding ticket. If I
You
could
may
be
only be
excused.
excused if you drive safely and get there in one piece.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see you soon, and I'm sure that Candace will follow up with anything pertinent.
Okay,
Take care.
thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Wanted to share with you, the last time I was with you, had to leave early to go catch a plane to try to get a passport to go to Israel for, to understand more on how Israel works their water situation and how they've gone from being really water stressed and in a water crisis to being so water rich that they are now, selling water to their neighbors. So we did go as a Utah delegation, and it included members from UDAF, the Department of Agriculture and Food, Natural Resources, Colorado River Authority of Utah. We had some water conservancy districts, a representative and a senator from the legislature. So it was a great kind of turnout of variety of people. Also, academia was represented as well, and the media. We had Ben Winslow attend as well. So it was a fascinating trip. Just really quick about Israel. So there's about 10 million people. It's about the size of New Jersey. 90% of the Israeli population lives in or around urban desert or urban areas, and about 60% of the land mass is desert. They call it the Negev Desert. So with a growing population, they have been implementing water efficiency practices since the early 60s. I learned that they started drip irrigating, in the 1960s, and we're just trying to just now be like, will drip work here? I don't know. Maybe we should test it. And they've been doing it for a lot of years. So really fascinating. We saw a lot of things. Ben joked that we saw all the greatest conference rooms in Israel, which we did, and we got out in the field. So I could spend a long time talking about the trip and all the things that we learned. The one main thing, I guess I want to share 3 things that I really learned about how Israel went from being water stressed to water rich. And one is through their kind of, the way they set up their water. They've nationalized their water, their regulation of it, and their pricing of water, which is super fascinating. So obviously some of those things aren't going to happen here. I don't think that we're going to nationalize our water anytime soon in the U.S., but their water pricing is interesting and something that I think we can all kind of consider. And another point is and this kind of gets into my second point on their culture, but they also have a culture to do what's the greatest good for everybody. Like they have a very altruistic kind of perspective on how to support everyone in the country. So for an example on that, as far as water pricing, everyone in Israel, there's a couple of different buckets depending on what sector you're in, but if you're a domestic use, you pay the same in Tel Aviv as you do, miles away in the Negev Desert, even though those in Tel Aviv are probably helping to support all the pipeline and all the pump and everything it takes to get water to the Negev Desert. They all pay the same. They do pay a lot more for water. We estimated that per individual, they likely pay $100 to $150 per month for their water. And so it's quite a bit expensive. That being noted, about 75% of their water supply right now comes from desalination. So that is a very expensive process. So it does make sense that their water is priced higher, but it is very expensive. The other interesting thing is that they use every drop. So they get most of their water from desalination, and then about 70% of their treated reuse or treated effluent is reused on farms. And to give you an example, so they are the highest user of reuse water in the whole entire world. The second next country is in Spain, and they use about 25% of their reuse water. So they use a lot of their water and then use it again. So, and this kind of goes to my second point element that I learned was their culture and how they use every drop wisely. So that was very apparent. Their cultural themes run really strong in a lot of different ways, even from not only just from how they use water, but also like their fitness. Like I walked on the promenade at Tel Aviv, and there's like outdoor gyms everywhere and everyone's running and doing things. It was just like really fascinating to see how these kind of threads, show up in all these different ways. And then the other element that I wanted to share was their innovation. And it kind of speaks to the fact that they have 5 desalination plants and more on their horizon, their reuse capacity. They have, at least 3 different, we visited at least 3 different innovation centers. One was run by the country, the Israeli Water Innovation Authority or something like that is the name. And then 2 were kind of offshoots of universities, it seems, but like innovation centers, one in the Negev Desert and one in Marett, also known as the Sea of Galilee. So really fascinating how they kept pushing innovation and using every drop wisely. And I mentioned this over lunch, but I thought I'd repeat it again. And as part of their innovation, they also have the culture of that failure is not bad. we can try things, we can get them wrong, we can fail, and we'll learn from them and be better next time. So it was a really fascinating trip, and I have a slideshow that I'll send to you. I didn't want to go through it all. Just you can see some pictures and see some things, and I made a couple of comments. Yeah, it was an amazing trip, and I learned a lot, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity to expand how we innovate in Utah, how we culturally look at water, and I think there's a lot of opportunities to implement some of the things that we learned. So I'm trying to keep that pretty short because I know you guys have already had a long day. There were just a few other items that I wanted to cover. We did have a Bear River Commission meeting. Charles and I attended on April 18th. It was at the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge, and the main agenda item was the adoption of the Commission's depletion estimates. So they have been, our teams, both in Utah, Idaho and Wyoming, have been working very hard over the last several years to update the depletion estimates, and we finally got to that point and got those done. And yeah, it was a great thing, and I just have to give a shout out for the folks at Water Resources who worked on that effort. That they did a great job, and they were praised in the meeting for doing a good job and being on top of things. The other element that was shared is they produced it's an older document, but they kind of cleaned it up and made it more usable. It's called The History of the Bear River Compact by Wallace Gibson. You can find it on the Commission's website, and I can send you a link to that as well. But if you're interested to learn more about that history. So it was a good bittersweet meeting, I'll have to say. After that meeting, Teresa Wilhelmsen, the state engineer, will now be the Bear River Commission. So I got to say goodbyes to the commission. But yeah, it was a good meeting. A couple other things, just wanted you guys to be aware as far as the Colorado River. The Bureau of Reclamation did release its long-awaited draft environmental impact statement to modify the existing operational criteria, the interim guidelines that were adopted in 2007. So there are 3 alternatives. The document's about 500 pages, so if you need some light nighttime reading and you really love EISs, you can go and dive into that. The public comment is due the end of May, I believe May 31st, so if that is something you guys want more information on, I'm happy to send more information your way. We did launch our landscape incentives. We had a press event with the governor on May 1st, and so that was launched through UtahWaterSavers.com. So that was really great. We sent letters across all of our area that we cover. So the Water Conservancy, the big Water Conservancy districts that already have a landscape program cover their areas, and then the rest of the state, the Division Water Resources covers. So we have sent them letters notifying them of the program and the requirements associated with that. So it's pretty exciting there. With SB, so moving on to a new topic of agricultural water optimization, with the passage of SB 277, that pretty much sunsetted what the Agricultural Water Optimization Task Force and created a new committee called the Agricultural Water Optimization Committee. So that will start going in July 1st and is being led by UDAF, but yep, so that's still going on, and they have a whole bunch of money to try to get out the door. A couple other items of note. Governor Spencer Cox last week issued an emergency declaration for flooding. And this week, he's issuing an executive order requiring water conservation at state facilities with the goal of increasing Utah's drought resiliency. And I really actually supported this executive order because in the long term, we really need to increase our drought resiliency. And if we're not in drought, we're probably preparing for the next one here in Utah. So it just is wise water management to do that. And then Just a couple other things. We do have a Growing Water Smart workshop in June 6th through the 8th in Logan. We have 7 cities attending that: Salt Lake City, Cottonwood Heights, North Salt Lake City, Clearfield, North Logan, Cache County, and Box Elder County. And you may be thinking, wow, those sound very northern, and they very much are. We are working with Washington County Water Conservancy District to host a Growing Water Smart workshop in Washington County this fall, and we'll look for more areas and opportunities to do more of those and make them more widely available. And then lastly, just wanted to give a couple updates on Great Salt Lake. Great Salt Lake in the South Arm, the elevation is up to, I looked at this yesterday, so I didn't look today, but 4192.9, so that's almost 4.5 feet up from where its record low was last November. So we've seen quite a big increase, obviously due to all the snowpack. And then the salinity is down to about 154 grams per liter, which is about 14% salinity, so in a much healthier range than it was last year. I do want to note, since that is such a big jump, there is a reason beyond Mother Nature and the precipitation and the increased inflow. There was also a modification to the berm that goes across the causeway. And our team here at Water Resources, a couple of our engineers and folks spent some time out there working on the design and doing that, overseeing that project as it was constructed. We worked with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, Union Pacific, and the contractor last summer to construct the berm in the bottom portion of the breach. So pretty much, if you think of so the causeway goes across, there was a big bridge kind of put in, and then the berm, they've just raised it. So they've raised the bottom floor of the lake elevation up to the point of damming it to at 4192. So there was no longer south arm flows moving into the north arm. And so now that it's up to 4192.9, right, it's starting to spill over into the north arm. So we do anticipate the increase of Great Salt Lake will slow down just because now we're filling both sides of the reservoir than just one. But just a big shout out to the team that worked on that. And while I'm doing that, I also just want to say thank you to all of the Water Resources team. They are awesome, and I am so grateful to work with all of them. They make my job and life easier, and I just am very much grateful for them. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Candace. I guess maybe on behalf of the board, we'll just say a big ditto. Just every time I walk into this meeting, I just can't believe all of the work that you all carry on for the state, and just really a total pleasure to work with you all. And given that we really are getting very short on time, I think we'll just get with you on any questions that we have on your report offline. But it was an excellent report, great to hear about Israel and then all the other items, and we'll look forward to following up with you offline. And then I would just be looking for a final motion.
Madam Chair, motion to adjourn.
All right, second.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? All right, great. Well, we'll see everyone in June, and I'm sure we'll be in touch sooner than that. So thanks for a great meeting.
Thank you, guys.